From the outside, Ethan's new home looked like any other suburban dream. Neatly trimmed hedges, a two-car garage, and a quiet street lined with cookie-cutter houses. But what no one in the neighborhood knew, what not even the real estate agent fully appreciated, was what lay behind a thin curtain of pines at the rear of his backyard. A hidden lake. It wasn't just any lake. It was glassy and secluded, untouched by footprints or noise. No roads led to it. There were no docks, no benches, no paths. Just a narrow dirt trail Ethan had carved himself that curved through the trees and opened up into a secret blue oasis. It was part of the property title, a rare stroke of legal gold. The lake, the shoreline, and even the access path were all privately deeded to him. To Ethan, it was priceless. A place to fish in silence, to read on the dock he built by hand, to hear nothing but the wind, frogs, and the occasional splash of a bass. So when he spotted two kids jumping off his dock one Saturday morning, his blood froze. At first, he thought maybe they were lost. But then came the parents. A man holding a beer, a woman yelling over music from a Bluetooth speaker. They weren't apologetic. They waved like they belonged. That's when the woman shouted. Karen said we could use the community lake. Community lake. Ethan stepped forward from the trees and called out, "This is private property." The dad rolled his eyes. Karen said this is part of the HOA's shared zone. We just moved in. Ethan's mouth went dry. There was no way. He'd reviewed the title 5 times before closing. There was nothing in the HOA's reach that even touched his parcel. That night, his mailbox held a thick envelope, the latest HOA newsletter. He hadn't even read one before, but the cover screamed in bold red letters, "Big Lake now open to all residents." There was even a photo, aerial, grainy, of his lake. His dock was barely visible, like a tiny splinter against the shore. Inside, a note from the HOA president explained, "To celebrate community spirit, the lake behind Lot 47 is now designated for shared recreational use." Lot 47. That was Ethan's address. His hand shook as he reread the lines. Who gave them the authority? Who told them it was public? Who the hell was Karen Whitmore? The name was stamped on every page like a watermark. By the next morning, someone had set up a folding chair on the far side of the lake, a portable grill. A toddler's floaty drifted in the shallows. And the worst part, they had no idea the storm they'd just started. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the lake shimmer under moonlight, but all he could see was the red lettering from the HOA newsletter burned into his mind. Now designated for shared recreational use. How? Who gave permission? He owned the land, deed, and all. Not a single inch of that lake touched HOA property. This wasn't just confusion. It was a hostile takeover disguised as neighborhood hospitality. By dawn, he was on the phone with the county registrar's office, confirming what he already knew. The lake was privately deeded. The access trail was an easement, but only to himself, since it didn't connect to any public road. He wasn't crazy, but something crazy was definitely going on. At 11:02 a.m., he rang the doorbell of the HOA president. A tall, pastel-painted home at the end of the cul-de-sac with matching gnomes on the porch. Karen Whitmore answered the door with a smile too wide and eyes too alert. "Oh, you must be Ethan," she chirped, brushing invisible lint off her floral cardigan. "Come in. You're just in time. We're about to vote on the spring flower beds." "I'm here about the lake," Ethan said sharply. Karen blinked once, her smile faltering just slightly. "What about it?" "It's not part of the HOA," he said. "It's deeded to me. It's private property." Karen laughed, actually laughed, and motioned toward a cluttered table filled with coffee mugs and binders. "That's where you're mistaken. The board agreed that unutilized land like that could be better served by the community. It builds cohesion." "It's not unutilized," Ethan replied. "I fish there. I built the dock. That's my land." Karen's tone cooled by 10 degrees. "We've decided otherwise." The words echoed. "We've decided otherwise," like she was a queen and the neighborhood her kingdom. Ethan took a slow breath. "You don't have the authority." Karen leaned forward. "The board represents the interests of the community. You're not even a participating member. I don't need to be. My lot is outside the HOA boundaries." She gave him a pitying look. "It's all about intent, Ethan. And the intent is unity." That was the moment he realized. This wasn't ignorance. This was entitlement with paperwork. As he left her porch, Karen called after him. "Oh, and just so you know, we're hosting a community BBQ by the lake this Sunday. Bring a side dish." Ethan walked away without answering. But that night, while the rest of the neighborhood slept, he was in the shed, digging out metal posts, chains, and a reinforced padlock. They wanted unity. They were about to get a locked gate, and a war they never saw coming. By sunrise, Ethan had turned his quiet lakeside haven into a fortress. The steel gate went up first, anchored into the trees flanking the only footpath that connected the lake to the rest of the neighborhood. Then came the signs. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." He wired in a motion-activated camera he'd once bought for wildlife photography, aimed squarely at the trailhead. He didn't stop there. He stacked logs along the side to block any detour paths and drilled brackets onto the dock's entrance to prevent access from the water. When he stepped back and looked at his work, it didn't feel like overkill. It felt necessary. At 9:14 am, his camera pinged. Live feed. A group of 3 people stood in front of the new gate. A woman took a picture of the lock. A teenager tugged on the chain. One of them loudly asked, "Is this even legal?" Ethan didn't move. He just watched. 10 minutes later, they were gone. But the real test came later that afternoon. A screech of tires echoed through the trees. Ethan walked out just in time to see Karen marching down the trail in full view, flanked by 2 clipboard-carrying board members. She was wearing sneakers this time, prepared for battle. She stopped short at the gate, her expression twisting like she'd smelled something rotten. "Oh, no, she said. "What is this?" "It's called my land," Ethan said, stepping into view. Karen turned slowly, like she hadn't seen him there. "This violates HOA Ordinance 3B. No member may restrict access to shared resources. I'm not a member, and it's not a shared resource. The deed says it's mine." She held up her phone and took a picture of the lock. "We'll see what the police say about this." Ethan folded his arms. "Go ahead. I'll be waiting, with the documents." Karen sneered. "You're not going to bully this community into submission with padlocks and paranoia." But it wasn't paranoia. Because that evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, someone vandalized the gate. Ethan found it swinging open, the chain on the ground, the lock bolt cut clean through with a tool. A crumpled note was wedged into the gatepost, scrawled in red marker. "You don't own nature." It wasn't just defiance anymore. It was a warning. Ethan took a slow breath, reset the chain with a heavier-duty lock, and added a second trail cam hidden in the brush. He wasn't backing down. This was his property, his fight, and someone, maybe Karen, maybe one of her pawns, was getting desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. The morning after the gate was destroyed, Ethan didn't go to work. He set up a lawn chair just outside the forested trail entrance, sipping black coffee as he waited. His trail camera had captured the culprits in full color. 2 men in HOA shirts, landscaping volunteers, laughing while they sawed through his lock like it was a fallen tree limb. And standing behind them, arms folded like a general at parade rest, was Karen Whitmore. She had declared war. At 10:03 a.m., her troops returned. This time they came with tools, rakes, shovels, hedge trimmers, and a gas-powered chainsaw. 7 of them in total, all wearing bright HOA vests. Karen led the march like a parade marshal. Ethan stood as they approached the trail, the new reinforced lock gleaming in the sun. "I hope you're ready to face the consequences." Karen said, not even saying hello. For protecting my property, Ethan replied. Go ahead. Karen nodded to one of her volunteers, a burly man with a buzz cut. He revved the chainsaw and stepped forward. Ethan didn't move. You might want to stop right there, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his phone. With a single tap, the video feed played. It showed the previous night's vandalism, buzzcut guy included, along with Karen watching in the background. You're on camera, Ethan said calmly. I've already sent this to my lawyer and the sheriff's department. Karen's expression twitched. You're bluffing, she said, though her voice cracked slightly. Ethan tilted the screen so she could see the paused image of her face under night vision. One of the volunteers turned to her. Karen, is that from yesterday? Karen ignored him. You think you're clever, she snapped. But this isn't over. We passed a motion at the emergency board meeting. We voted. The lake is community property now. You can vote all you want, Ethan said. You can't steal land with a clipboard and a barbecue invitation. She stepped closer, nose nearly to his chest. You're selfish. You're arrogant. You think you're better than the rest of us just because you have a little water behind your house. No, Ethan said, eyes narrowing. I think I'm smarter than someone who tries to take what isn't hers. Karen opened her mouth, then stopped. Instead, she hissed, We'll see what the police say about your little illegal fence. And just like that, she turned, motioned to her group, and stormed off, defeated, but not finished. That night, Ethan upgraded the camera system, installed solar lights along the trail, and for the first time, he set up a live stream connected to cloud storage. Because he knew what was coming next. Karen wouldn't back off. Not now. Not when she was cornered. And sure enough, 2 days later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the woods. Karen had called the cops. The cruiser's lights flickered through the trees like a silent alarm. Ethan stood motionless as the red and blue glow pulsed across the brush. He could hear the gravel crunch under the tires, slow and deliberate. The cruiser parked at the edge of his driveway. A uniformed officer stepped out, hand resting near his holster, not aggressive, but cautious. Behind him, of course, was Karen Whitmore, arms crossed, lips pursed, standing like she was the sheriff herself. Afternoon, the officer said, giving Ethan a neutral nod. Got a call from the HOA about a potential obstruction of community property. Ethan forced a polite smile. I figured she might try that. Karen stepped forward before the officer could respond. He's built an illegal structure. He's locking people out of the lake. He's hostile and threatening toward neighbors. Ma'am, the officer cut in, raising a hand. Let me talk to him first. She huffed but obeyed, clearly expecting this to go her way. Ethan gestured toward the trail. Would you like to see the property line? The officer nodded, and they walked together through the pines. At the gate, Ethan pulled out a folder. Inside, the deed, survey maps, GPS boundary overlays, and notarized county records, all of it highlighted and tabbed. I installed the gate after multiple trespassing incidents, Ethan explained. I've had vandalism, threats, even attempted property damage caught on camera. The HOA has no claim to this lake. It's fully private, and I have everything documented. The officer flipped through the pages silently, browsed furrowing deeper the longer he read. Finally, he looked up. You've got all your paperwork in order. This is solid. A loud scoff erupted behind them. Karen had followed despite the warning. Are you kidding me? We voted. The board decided this would be community property. The officer raised an eyebrow. You voted to take land you don't own. Karen's face flushed red. It's a shared resource. He's not even part of the HOA. He's not obligated to be, the officer said flatly. His land's outside your jurisdiction. You're seriously going to side with him? She snapped, pointing a trembling finger. I'm siding with the law, the officer replied. Karen opened her mouth again, but the officer turned back to Ethan. I'd recommend filing a formal trespassing report. If they keep coming back, we can escalate. Might even want to talk to your lawyer about a cease and desist. Already working on it, Ethan said, eyes never leaving Karen's. As the officer walked back to his cruiser, Karen stayed frozen, jaw clenched. Ethan gave her a small, calm smile. This could have ended with a conversation. You chose a war. Karen's eyes narrowed. This isn't over. You'll regret embarrassing me. She turned sharply and stormed back to the street, but something in her posture had changed. She looked cornered. And Ethan knew. The next move would be her most desperate one yet. 2 days of silence. No angry knocks, no spray paint, no chainsaws in the night. Ethan had almost let himself believe the storm had passed, until a city-marked SUV pulled into his driveway, and a man in an orange vest stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Morning," the man said, adjusting his hard hat. "You the property owner of Lot 47? "I am," Ethan replied slowly, instincts prickling. "What's this about?" "Got a report of possible environmental violations. Construction near a protected wetland without permit." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You're kidding." The man shook his head. "Nope. Says here a dock was built without proper evaluation. Also got concerns about restricted access to a previously unreviewed body of water." A slow, icy anger bloomed in Ethan's chest. Karen, again. She'd gone over his head, to the city this time. "I have the permits for the dock," Ethan said. "And the lake isn't protected. It's not even natural. It was man-made in the 80s, originally part of a private ranch. I've got documentation to prove that." "Still," the inspector said, "we'll need to do a walkthrough. I'm required to take measurements and file a full report." Ethan nodded, but inside, a storm was brewing. He led the man to the trail. The gate stood intact, the locks undisturbed, but the silence of the trees felt heavier today, like they were watching. The inspector walked slowly around the shoreline, jotting notes, snapping photos. Then he paused near the far edge, where the trees thickened and the brush turned to stone. He looked puzzled. "This boundary line seems off." Ethan turned. "What do you mean?" The inspector pulled out a folded survey map, an older one. "This map shows a small parcel along the lake's edge that's not listed under your deed." Ethan frowned. "That can't be right. I had a full survey done last year when I bought the place." The man flipped to the back side of the map. "According to this, that sliver was once a utility easement. Might have been for pumping or drainage back when the ranch was still active. But it was absorbed into my deed, right?" The inspector hesitated. "Should have been. But this record shows it was never officially reassigned. It's not owned by the HOA either. It's listed under a shell trust from 30 years ago." Ethan felt a cold ripple run down his spine. "Who owns that trust now?" he asked. "Hard to say," the man muttered. "Could be a paperwork glitch, or someone left it open for a reason." Ethan's mind raced. Had Karen known? Was that tiny sliver, the piece with the clearest lake access, the loophole she needed to wedge herself into his property? As the inspector wrapped up, Ethan stared across the lake, heart pounding. Something didn't add up. This wasn't just about entitlement anymore. This was about a loophole. And someone, maybe Karen, had just found the crack in the wall. Ethan didn't sleep that night, not because of the lake, but because of that one sliver of land. That ghost parcel, that 30-year-old trust, that silent crack in his armor. He spread the survey maps across his dining table, overlaying them with his deed, satellite photos, and even old Google Earth captures. It all matched, except for that one crescent-shaped edge of shore, barely 12 feet wide, but wide enough to step around his gate and call it access. The name on the trust was generic, Red Pines Legacy Holdings. No owner, no address, just a P.O. box that hadn't been touched in decades. He called the county records office first thing. After some digging, a clerk reluctantly gave him a name attached to the dormant trust. Lyle Whitmore. Ethan froze. Whitmore. Karen's husband. He leaned back in his chair, pulse pounding. You've got to be kidding me. He remembered the first time he saw Karen's yard. The picture-perfect picket fence, matching flower pots, and a wooden sign by the mailbox that read the Whitmore Nest, established 1996. So that's what this was. Karen wasn't just nosy. She thought the lake belonged to her. Not legally, not on paper, but in her mind. Her husband had ties to the original land trust. Maybe he helped develop the old ranch. Maybe he thought that slice of shoreline would always be theirs. But then the property was subdivided, forgotten, lost in clerical limbo, until Ethan bought it. And suddenly, Karen realized she'd been cut off from something she believed was hers all along. He made a call to his lawyer. I need a title deep dive. Anything tied to Red Pines Legacy Holdings. Beneficiaries, transfers, old lions, everything. By afternoon, the answer came. Karen was never listed on the trust, but when her husband passed away, she had quietly filed a petition to claim any unassigned interests. It had been denied, twice. And now, somehow, she'd used the HOA as her weapon of revenge. Ethan stood by the trail that evening, wind brushing through the pines like whispers. His camera caught movement again. 2 figures near the fence, talking in hushed tones. One of them was Karen, flashlight in hand, pointing at the side brush. The other was someone he didn't recognize. They weren't coming to tear down the gate this time. They were scouting a way around it, and with that forgotten sliver of land, they just might have found one. Ethan's fists clenched. This wasn't about fishing. It wasn't about community. It was about obsession. Karen didn't want access. She wanted control. Over the lake, over the narrative, over him. And now that she'd uncovered a loophole, she wasn't going to knock on doors anymore. She was going to break through the cracks. The moon was a thin crescent when Ethan stood in front of the gate for the last time. Everything had led to this moment. The trespassing, the calls to the cops, the vandalism, the legal research, it was all building up to the inevitable. Karen wouldn't stop. She was too far gone. Convinced she was in the right. She'd found her way around the gate, and now she was ready to make her move. Ethan had stayed awake, watching the cameras. And sure enough, at midnight, Karen appeared again. This time, it wasn't with a group. It was just her, standing alone, a crowbar in hand. Ethan stepped out of the shadows, his heart pounding. "Karen," he called out, voice low but firm. "What the hell are you doing?" She froze, but only for a second. Then, a bitter smile crossed her face. "I'm finishing what you started, Ethan. You've made your point. But this lake belongs to all of us. You don't get to decide that," he shot back, stepping forward. "This is mine, and you've been crossing lines for weeks. I won't let you get away with it." She sneered. "You think I'm afraid of your little gate, of your cameras? I know where the loophole is. I've seen the land records." A chill ran through Ethan. She knew about the trust, about the contested sliver of land. It was exactly what he'd feared. But it wasn't just that. Karen had already planned her next move. She wasn't here to negotiate anymore. Karen swung the crowbar at the base of the gate with a force that rang out through the trees. The chain snapped open. "I'll take it all, Ethan," she said, her voice venomous. "Everything you thought you owned." But before she could pry the gate open, a set of headlights shone through the trees, and sirens wailed in the distance. Karen's head whipped around. "You called the cops?" "No," Ethan replied, his eyes narrowing. "But they've been watching." From behind the trees, the officer who had come earlier appeared, followed by another car. A detective, this time, standing with arms crossed. The officer stepped toward Karen, his face unreadable. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, "I've got a warrant for your arrest." Karen went stiff, eyes wide in disbelief. "What? This is my land." The detective pulled out a set of documents, "We've been investigating your claims, Mrs. Whitmore. And it turns out you've been filing fraudulent petitions for months. You've been using the HOA as a cover-up to illegally encroach on private property." Ethan's jaw dropped. It wasn't just about the lake. Karen had been manipulating the HOA and the system itself to seize land from neighbors who didn't comply with her demands. She had been trying to bypass the law through backdoor dealings and falsify paperwork. "You're under arrest for attempted fraud and vandalism," the detective continued, handcuffing her as she sputtered in disbelief. "You don't understand. It was supposed to be mine. I deserved it." Karen screamed, thrashing in the officer's grip. As she was escorted to the cruiser, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion settle over him. The fight was over, but the damage was done. The next morning, Ethan took a long walk by the lake, the silence broken only by the sound of water lapping gently against the shore. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. The lake was his. The fight was over. But as the sun rose over the water, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't won just a battle with Karen. He had fought the very idea of entitlement. In the end, it wasn't the gates or the locks or the cameras that kept him safe. It was his unwavering belief that some things, like land and freedom, can't just be taken. They have to be earned.